In this video, we are going to discuss about the cardiovascular system, anatomy of the heart chambers, the heart wall and walls. The heart and the blood vessels form the cardiovascular system. CVS is the transport system of the body that carries nutrients and oxygenated blood to and from the cells and removes their waste products. The heart is a muscular organ controlled by the autonomic nervous system containing 4 chambers. The main function is to pump blood around the circulatory system of the lungs and the systemic circulation of the rest of the body. Arteries and veins that carry blood throughout the body keep the heart filled with blood and maintain blood pressure. In the average day, the heart beats about 100,000 times and never rests. It must continue its cycle of contraction and relaxation in order to provide a continuous blood supply to the tissues and ensure the delivery of nutrients and oxygen and the removal of waste products. The heart is about the size of a fist, a hollow muscular organ located in the center of the thorax. The heart lies in the thoracic cavity in the mediastinum, a space between the lungs and beneath the sternum, and the rest on the diaphragm. Depending on body size and type, the heart may be positioned more upright, that is, tall bodies, or more tilted, barrel-chested bodies. The heart tilts toward the left so that 2/3 of it extends to the left of the body's midline and the rest left of the mid-sagittal plane. It has a broad superior base attached to the great vessels and a pointed apex, that is end, immediately superior to the diaphragm. The heart weighs approximately 300 grams. The weight and size of the heart are influenced by age, gender, body weight, extent of physical exercise and conditioning, and heart disease. The heart could be called the engine of life. This incredibly powerful organ works constantly, never pausing, composed of a type of muscle found nowhere else in the body. The heart works to pump blood throughout the body, delivering oxygen-rich blood to organs and tissues and returning oxygen-poor blood to the lungs. Now we'll see heart chambers. There are 4 heart chambers. The 2 upper chambers are called atria. Singular form is atrium. The 2 lower chambers are called ventricles. Right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the body via the superior and inferior vena cava. The right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium and pumps it to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs via 4 pulmonary veins. The left ventricle is the largest and most muscular chamber. It receives oxygenated blood from the lungs via the left atrium and pumps blood into the systemic circulation via the aorta. Atria serve primarily as reservoirs, receiving blood from the body or lungs. The right and left atria are separated by a common wall of myocardium called the interatrial septum. Because the atria move blood only a short distance, that is from the atria to the ventricle, they don't have to generate much force. Consequently, the walls of the atria are not very thick, it's very thin. The ventricles serve as pumps, receiving blood from the atria and then pumping it either to the lungs, that is from the right ventricle, or to the body, that is from the left ventricle. The right and left ventricles are separated by the interventricular septum. Because the ventricles pump rather than receive blood, they must generate more force than the atria. Therefore, the walls of the ventricles are thicker than those of the atria. Furthermore, because the left ventricle must generate enough force to pump blood throughout the body rather than just to the lungs, its walls are thicker than those of the right ventricle. Next is heart wall. The heart consists of 3 layers. The epicardium is the outermost layer of the heart. The epicardium, which consists of a thin layer of squamous epithelial cells, covers the heart surface, also known as the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. The epicardium is closely integrated with the myocardium. Myocardium is the middle layer and is the actual contracting muscle of the heart. It composed of a cardiac muscle and it is the thickest of the three layers and performs the work of the heart. The cardiac muscle is responsible for the contractility of the heart and therefore the pumping action. The cardiac muscle contracts with enough force and enough blood to supply the metabolic demands of the entire body. The endocardium is the innermost layer and lines the inner chambers and heart walls. At the heart's base, the serous pericardium falls back on itself to form the endocardium. It is very smooth, an important characteristic that helps keep blood from clotting as it fills the heart's chambers. The endocardium lines the heart chambers, covers the valves and continues into the vessels. It consists of a thin layer of squamous epithelial cells. The pericardium. The pericardium is a sac of connective tissue that surrounds and encloses the heart and the roots of the attached blood vessels. It consists of two parts. The outer part is the tough fibrous pericardium, while the inner part is the serous pericardium, the double layer of serous membrane forming an enclosed sac with the pericardial cavity between them. The cavity contains a small quantity of pericardial fluid that acts as a lubricant and allows the two layers to easily slide over one another with each heartbeat. Surrounding the heart is a double-walled sac called the pericardium, anchored by ligaments and tissues to surrounding structures. Pericardial sac encases and protects the heart from trauma and infection. The pericardium has two layers, the fibrous pericardium and the serous pericardium. The fibrous pericardium is a loose-fitting sac of strong connective tissue, is the outermost layer. The serous pericardium, which consists of again two layers, covers the heart surface. Parietal layer, which lines the inside of the fibrous pericardium, and the visceral layer, which covers the heart surface. Between these two layers is a pericardial cavity. This cavity contains a small amount of serous fluid which helps prevent friction as the heart beats. The pericardial space between the parietal and visceral layers holds 5 to 20 ml of pericardial fluid to lubricate the pericardial surface and cushion the heart. Now let us see the blood vessels. Arteries are vessels through which the blood passes away from the heart to various parts of the body. They convey highly oxygenated blood from the left side of the heart to the tissues. Arterioles control the blood flow into the capillaries. Capillaries allow the exchange of fluid and nutrients between the blood and the interstitial spaces. Venules receive blood from the capillary bed and move blood into the veins. Veins transport deoxygenated blood from the tissues back to the right heart and then to the lungs for oxygenation. Valves help return blood to the heart against the force of gravity. The lymphatics drain the tissues and return the tissue fluid to the blood. Attached to the heart are several large vessels that transport blood to and from the heart called great vessels. They include the superior and inferior vena cava, which is to the right atrium, pulmonary artery, which is in the left ventricle, which branches into right and left pulmonary artery. 4 pulmonary veins seen in right atrium, 2 for each lung. The aorta, which is seen in right ventricle. Now let us see valves. Valves in the heart keep blood flowing in only one direction through the heart. Think of the valves as traffic cops at the entrance to one-way streets, preventing blood from traveling the wrong way despite great pressure to do so. Healthy valves open and close as a result of pressure changes within the 4 heart chambers. First is atrioventricular valve. It is seen between atria and ventricles. Tricuspid valve on the right side of the heart and mitral valve, that is bicuspid valve, on its left side. The atrioventricular valve closes at the beginning of ventricular contraction and prevent blood from flowing back into the atria from the ventricle. These valves open when the ventricles relax. Next is semilunar valve, the pulmonary valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, and the aortic valve between the left ventricle and the aorta. The semilunar valves prevent blood from flowing back into the ventricles during relaxation. They open during ventricular contraction and close when the ventricles begin to relax. Each valve has cusps or leaflets, which are anchored to the heart wall by cords of fibrous tissue, chordae tendineae. The cusps of the valves act to maintain tight closure. The tricuspid valve has 3 cusps and the mitral valve has 2 cusps, and each of the semilunar valves has 3 cusps. A semi-rigid fibrous connective tissue called the skeleton of the heart encircles each valve. Besides offering support for the heart, the skeleton keeps the valves from stretching. It also acts as an insulating barrier between the atria and the ventricles, preventing electrical impulses from reaching the ventricles other than through a normal conduction pathway.